This podcast was made for Te Reo Irirangi o Aotearoa, nā te māngai pāho I tautoko. Maumaharatia, e whai ana tātou I te tūpuna rongonui, I a te Pahi. Ko ia te pautoko manawa o tēnei kaupapa. Nā, I takahi ēnei whenua, kone atu I te rua rautau I mua. Remember, we are following the ancestor Te Pahi, a tūpuna who walked these lands more than 200 years ago.
He tangata ngākau nui.
He's very tall, he's got a statuesque nature.
He tangata tāroa.
He was tall, almost 6 foot.
Some say he was around maybe 6'5", 6'6".
Intellectually curious and inquiring and adventurous.
Ko Eugene Bingham tōku ingoa. For years I've been fascinated by the story of this rangatira no tētai tokiro, Te Pahi. His life, his hiding atu ahitereiria, and the dramas and mamai that followed. This is episode 2 of the 5-part Te Pahi podcast, The Rangatira, the King, and the Survivors. Wāhanga Tuarua, Poihākena, Sydney. When we left him, Te Pahi was looking to the horizon from his pā in Pewhairangi Bay of Islands. Intensely curious about te ao, ngā tikanga, the world and the customs of the Pākehā manuhiri visiting his motu. He resolved to visit Poihākena, Sydney, and to meet the kāwana, the governor, Philip Gidley King. I te tau kotahi mano warurau mārima 1805, ka haere a Te Pahi ki Poihākena. Te Pahi travels to Poihākena, Port Jackson, as Sydney was then known. And at Government House, he meets Kāwana King. Ka tahi anō, ka tūtaki ēnei rangatira. At long last, these two rangatira who've heard so much about each other finally meet. King wrote about it.
On being introduced, he took up a number of his mats, laying them at my feet, and disposed of a stone patu in the same manner, after which he performed the ceremony of itongi, or joining of noses.
Dame Anne Salmond, Te Pauhitori, has more details.
So Te Pahi arrives and he's wearing fine garments, chiefly attire, and basically says to him, here am I with my sons. Do you want me to go to Britain? Do you want me to stay in my own country? It was forging a relationship, a really deep one, with King.
He pātai tāku I a tākuta Deirdre Brown, he uri o Te Pahi.
That meeting between those two men, it feels like a real moment, rangatira to rangatira.
I think it was very much founded on notions of mana, that Te Pahi went as a rangatira of New Zealand and recognised the governorship of King, and Governor recognised the rangatira-tanga of Te Pahi. They were almost like envoys of their own cultures coming together.
And that was the thing about King.
Ko Dame Anne anō.
Unlike many Europeans at that time, he did understand about a gift exchange, and he did understand something about mana, at least. And for that reason, he was given mana. Mana travelled in that time. A rangatira could meet a king as an equal and a kāwana as an equal. And at that time, that seemed to work.
Rangatira ki te rangatira. So after that special hongi Governor King writes about, he ha anō ngā mahi a Te Pahi ki Poihākena I taua wā. What else does Te Pahi get up to? Hoi anō. To find out more, me haere au I tōna waiwai. I need to follow in his footsteps. Though before anything else, something very important. Ko te whakatau a te mana whenua, me ngā mihi tau tūtu. A welcome to country from the people of that land.
And I'll come around and I'll share some smoke as a gift and an offering.
Ko Uncle Dean Kelly tēnei. He's an elder, a whalewind man from Ewan country.
Smoke can be used for many reasons, for many purposes.
We need the help of a local guide. So as Tāwhiri Mātia lashes down, we're driving to meet a couple who are deeply familiar with the early stories of Māori in ahitereiria.
It's your power.
Yeah, our power's out. I mean, isn't that just terrible?
Terrible.
Ahakoa kaore he hiko I te whare. He mahana rawa tā raua whakatau mai.
I think you've arrived on one of the 20 days the sun doesn't shine. Apparently it shines 340 days of the year, yeah.
There's no electricity today at the house of Hōhepa Ruhe in Mount Low, but their welcome is very warm.
My name is Hōhepa Ruhe. I am from Fielding, but I live now in Australia. I am creator of Poihākena Tours, Stories of Māori in Sydney.
Hōhepa and Mel both worked at Te Papatonga Rewa and Pōneke before moving to Sydney and setting up kotahi tourism and their Poihākena tours.
I wanted people to know that our people were real. They walked and talked like everybody else. They had fun, they had humour, they had rather incredible adventures, and I sort of felt that I could do worse than putting them on my back and then carrying them proudly.
The stories he's researched and carried so proudly include those of Te Pahi.
I have had a wonderful relationship with this incredible rangatira for over a decade now.
And he's thought a lot about the whanaungatanga I waingia Te Pahi rāua ko King, the relationship between Te Pahi and the kāwana.
I always felt there was almost a brotherhood between the two. I felt that Te Pahi felt safe with King. I think they sort of put their hands on each other's shoulders and tried to not just advise each other, but also to support each other.
E ai ki a Hōhepa, he rereke noa atu te taone o Poihākena I taua wā, I tā tātou e mōhio nei e nāia nei. He says Poihākena was a very different place 220 years ago.
You would have seen a lot of Noe craft on the water, and it would have been women were the kings of the waters of Sydney Harbour. Now, a lot of those buildings in the early days were canvas, so there weren't a lot of permanent type buildings.
When in central Sydney, Te Pahi stayed as King's guest at Government House, Te Whare Kāwana. That building no longer exists. The Museum of Sydney now stands in its place. Te Pahi also stayed at the other Government House in Parramatta, which still stands today. Hōhepa says he had a very special experience there.
In Government House, in the living room, it was the first time Te Pahi tasted cakes. It blew his mind, you know. You can imagine that, sugar hitting your system for the first time.
Poihākena was new to Te Pahi, but Te Pahi was also new to Poihākena. Aotepo a Te Pahi e whaia haerehi ana. He was followed everywhere he went. I asked Dame Anne about this.
He was a bit of a celebrity to start with, wasn't he?
I think so. You know, sometimes that was unpleasant. I mean, somebody would mock his moko, for example. They say he retorted and said he thought that greasing your hair and putting powder in it was equally ridiculous. And King does remark that he would get very angry about any kind of slight. A woman had given him earrings and he had given them to a young woman, and this woman, one of the settlers, didn't like that, so she took them back off this young woman, and Te Pahi was furious and said, you know, she doesn't understand about mana, obviously, and about gift exchange.
Koha.
Tuku atu, tuku mai.
It sounds like he was feted, he was looked after, he was introduced to key people in the community, and those key people included John MacArthur, who was running a large sheep farm.
Ko Deirdre Brown anō.
That was possibly one of the most important meetings because he would have seen agriculture on a large scale. And I believe MacArthur also had a woolen mill. So this would have been Te Pahi's first taste of the Industrial Revolution, you know, seeing it being made, not just as items that turned up for trade.
Te Pahi was learning about new tools, new machines, new ways.
You know, ki te ia I ngā tapu-tapu, ngā mihini, ngā tikanga hau.
Herb Rihari, no Ngāti Torehina ki Mataka, says Te Pahi was on a haerenga of discovery, and it was for the well-being of his hapu.
He haerenga whainga ki te rapu I ngā mea hau, I ngā mea hei whakaora, mo tōna iwi, mo tōna hapu.
I think another influential meeting would have been the meeting with the Reverend Samuel Marsden.
Introduce my friend, Te Pahi Samuel Marsden. Welcome. Te Pahi.
Marsden was the senior chaplain of the colony and would later establish a mission in Aotearoa.
We know that they had a great conversation about religion. Samuel Marsden was greatly impressed by meeting Te Pahi.
E hara, I tino whakamiha a Samuel Marsden ki a Te Pahi. He would later write about his admiration for him.
He possessed a clear, strong and comprehensive mind and was anxious to gain what knowledge he could of our laws and customs. He was wont to converse much with me about our God.
Ao noa, pō noa, ko tā Te Pahi mahi, he ako. Te Pahi was constantly soaking up this new world, this new information.
He was kind of an ethnographer. He was really doing the same sort of thing that, I guess, ironically, people like Joseph Banks were doing on board the Endeavour.
Te Pahi was also very curious about the Pākehā court system. He aha nā tikanga o te pūnaha koti. At that time, the Australian court system was in its infancy, and it was unusual, even by the standards of that time. Hoi anō, e mārama aki ai tātou, ka toro au ki tētahi, kua ata rangahau i tēnei pūnaha tawhito. In order to better understand the system that intrigued Te Pahi in 1805, I need the help of an expert.
Tēnā koe e tākuta, tuatahi, e mihi ana ki a koe, me te whai whakaro ki te kōrero ki a hau. First of all, nō hea koe, ko wai koe.
I'm David Roberts. I'm from Newcastle in New South Wales, but I'm currently a Professor of History at the University of New England.
Professor Roberts specialises in the convict history of Ahitereiria, with a particular interest in early criminal law and court proceedings.
So the British, when they set this colony up, are faced with the decision of how do you administer justice and law to a population that is already under sentence of the law. And what they come up with is this strange military-civil hybrid. They're actually following British criminal law as closely as possible, but they're doing it with a military tribunal. So it's very autocratic, it's very unusual. I mean, for a start, you had the judge himself was the prosecutor, the judge advocate. You had no defence. You would see some aspects that we'd recognise today of witnesses being called forward to give some account of what has happened. And the defendants themselves would be allowed to make a statement, which was usually brief and, you know, there wasn't any sort of much professional legal argument. And then a series of military officers in full attire would then deliver their verdict.
Was there much coverage? Did the public know what was going on inside these courtrooms?
Well, I think it was an open court. You could go and watch, and people did.
And that's exactly what Te Pahi did one Friday. He headed to court to observe a trial of several men.
Find that the four accused ran as described by the witness.
But I'm gathering he was a distinguished guest, so he would have had a good view of proceedings. He would have sat there, he would have watched the judge read out the charges.
To hide, and with the intention, I'm quite sure.
He hoia e tahi o nā tāne. Some of the men were soldiers. The prisoners had been brought from the settlement of Port Dalrymple in what we now call Tasmania. I pupū aki te kehi I tētahi hara tino nui, arā I te tāhai. The charges in this case were extremely serious. Theft. Here's what King wrote in his journal.
2 soldiers and a convict were sent, prisoners, from Port Dalrymple to be tried by a criminal court for stealing some pork from the king's stores at that place.
This is a period where almost every form of theft is a serious offence, whether it's stealing food or stealing clothes. And I would guess that in the context of Port Dalrymple in the early 1800s, pork was pretty scarce, and it's stealing supplies from the government. It is a sort of crime that impinges on the well-being of the settlement.
Ki ngā tāngata o Poihākena, nui te he. To the people of New South Wales, this is a heinous crime, and they are used to the harsh sentences handed down by these quasi-military courts. But Te Pahi isn't yet familiar with the tikanga and kawa of Poihākena. So what happens when he discovers the fate of these men?
He was incredibly upset, imploring King.
Really? These guys are going to get punished for taking pork?
They're debating about who's right, and Te Pahi's holding his ground.
Ka whai aki tērā I wāhanga tuatoru. That was Wāhanga Tuarua, episode 2 of the 5-part Te Pahi podcast, written and presented by me, Eugene Bingham of Te Pūrongo Productions. As well as this podcast version, Te Pahi's haerenga is told in the new 2-part RNZ video documentary, Te Pahi, the Rangatira, the King and the Survivors. Check the show notes for links to that. There's also a book written by me, published by Eleanor Numwin, called The Chief and the Empire. Writing and podcast editing by Adam Dudding, mixing by Andrew McDowell of DigiCake. Stephanie Huriana Fong is the Poireo Māori. Annabelle Lee Mather and Mihi Narangi Forbes are the executive producers. Yarnit Nahu Owen is the RNZ Commissioner Māori. Produced for RNZ by Aotearoa Media Collective with funding from Te Māngai Pāho.